Check, check. All right. Hey, this seems to work great. Sounds good to me up here. I think everybody else is doing open spaces. I'm sorry for interrupting. But open space.
Check, check, check.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Good? Have a good open spaces? Yeah? Yeah. I saw there were lots of great participation, and I also heard from multiple people that had wished that they had proposed an open space topic today. We will be doing that again tomorrow. So feel free to take the conversations you had today or the conversations you didn't have but wished you had today and propose an open space tomorrow now that you're even more chummier with people. From past experience, it seems that open spaces are easier the second day because people aren't as anxious and shy. So please bring more topics tomorrow and chat about them with your new friends. Who's ready for another talk? Woo! Our last talk of the day is from a speaker who was raised on the streets of New Orleans as part of the Thieves Guild. Gambit rot. gained his powers at puberty and now serves the side of good by throwing charged line cards into machines and provisioning them with a kinetic blast. But today, he is here to talk to us about burnout. Please welcome to the stage, Jason Yee.
Thanks. Is this on? Sweet, it is on. Thank you. That's a fantastic intro. Cool. It's hard to follow that up even with a talk. So rather than talking about me, let's talk about my friend Bob. Bob is not his real name. I talked with Bob a while back and told him that I wanted to share his story. So he agreed, but I told him that I'd change the details, some of the details, his name, things like that, to protect his privacy. But a little bit more about Bob. Bob and I worked together a long time ago at a job way back, and the three things that I absolutely love about Bob and that I loved about working with him is that he's genuine and honest. He's enthusiastically curious, and he's an optimistically hard worker. And I think these all combine perfectly because when Bob says, hey, how's it going? He doesn't mean that as just hello. He actually means, how is it going? Tell me about the thing that you're working on. And if it's something that he hasn't worked on, that instantly charges him and is like, that's the thing that he's going to go home and he's going to Google about that and he's going to read up about it and find books on it and read blogs and learn about it and really dive into that. And that enthusiastic curiosity just makes him a fantastic person to work with. And that combined with the optimism of being a hard worker, Bob always had this idea that no matter what problem we encountered, and no matter what challenge we were issued, we could solve that, right? We just had to put our minds to it. There was something out there. We could just work on it, and together we could get it done. And that's what you really want out of a coworker. That's what I loved about working with Bob. We ended up moving on to different cities, working in different places, and eventually Bob landed this job, and I like to use this meme to describe what his company was like. They just didn't get it, right? From my outside perspective, they were a tech company who was just chasing buzzwords, and they didn't understand their customers, and they didn't understand what they were making, and they were constantly pivoting. And from Bob's inside perspective, they were doing all of that, and worse, they were having him work on stuff, and then they'd pivot, and then suddenly whatever he was working on and spent months of his life devoted to was just thrown away, right? And so Bob just ended up spending all these late nights to try to crank things out before deadlines, and then it got thrown away, and then put onto something else. One time Bob actually worked on the web performance, improved sales, actually pointed to me and was like, dude, I just sold like $1 million of stuff by making the site faster. And management was like, that's great, but we want to increase traffic. Like sales, let the salespeople deal with that, let marketing deal with that. Which is like, come on, like at least give the guy like a hand. Like Bob, the worst thing about this, though, is in the midst of all that changes, management decided that, like, cool, Bob worked on this thing, and that's not what we prioritize. Clearly, there's a communication breakdown. So Bob was working remote at this point, and they decided that, well, because communication is bad, clearly we need to move Bob into the office. So they didn't cancel remote work for the company. They just did it for him because they needed to watch him more. So when he ended up moving, that caused a breakdown. All the things that he loved to do, he played in a softball rec league, he had a little garage band, some guys that he got together with, like those all went away. They moved him out to Silicon Valley, and so he's just working all the time and feeling more and more isolated. So as I'm keeping in touch with Bob, one thing that I noticed is that he started tweeting things that were increasingly out of character. Is everyone familiar with the Cap Theorem? Cap Theorem says in distributed systems, you have three things, you can only choose two. So Bob tweeted one day about the Cap Theorem of life, and that you could only succeed in work, family, or health, and choose two. And I was like, that is fucked up. And so I ended up calling him. It was the end of the day, I got off work, I gave him a call. and I realized immediately on this call that something wasn't right. So we ended up talking. Burnout was really destroying his relationships, and he had started self-medicating. So I realized he was really, really high, and I didn't know what to do, right? When you're in another state and you're talking with a friend, or maybe it's a colleague, and something is clearly wrong, what do you do with that? I wasn't equipped for this. Should I hang up and call the cops? Should I keep him on the line? How do you deal with something like this? And I realized, again, I wasn't equipped, and it terrified me. So what am I equipped for? Well, I'm Jason, as mentioned. I throw explosive things to cure servers. Actually, what I do is I travel around. I'm a technical evangelist for Datadog. So I help people with their technology problems and how to monitor those. I'm a collector of miles, whiskey, and Pokemon. So if anybody here still plays Pokemon Go, I'm hoping that QR code isn't completely cut off, but you can friend me. I'll send you stuff. These are ways that I help deal with stress. Travel, drinking whiskey responsibly. Don't abuse that. Don't make that your self-medication. And Pokemon gets me out and walking around and exploring, which I like. If you ever need to reach me, I'm GetBisect on Twitter, JE at DatadogHQ. A little bit about Datadog, since they do pay my salary and allow me to come to things like this. Datadog is a SaaS-based monitoring platform. We do metrics, infrastructure application metrics. We do distributed tracing and logs. And we handle trillions of points of data every day for thousands and thousands of customers. It is a fantastic place to work, so if you are in a place that's burning you out and you would like to work with some amazing engineers building really cool products, check out jobs.datadoghq.com. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I've called this talk Burnout Community Problem, Community Solution because I think it's something that affects all of us. And I think it's going to require all of us in order to actually solve this problem. So I wasn't equipped to deal with this, and I think most of us aren't, but a lot of people ask me, is this really a community problem, right? Is this something that we deal with en masse? And so there was actually a company called GFI. They ran a study in 2015 and 2016. Unfortunately, they haven't continued it, but in the last study in 2016, they surveyed all of these IT administrators, ops engineers, and came up with some stats, and one of those stats is that 40% of us regularly lose sleep due to stress. This isn't saying that it's because we're on call and we're staying up because something might happen. It's saying that we're stressed out. We're afraid that something's going to happen even when we're not on call and we're losing sleep. They said that 50% of us work between 8 to 20 hours of overtime every week. This is an interesting thing because they didn't actually specify what overtime is. So if you're used to working a 45-hour week, overtime could be 50 hours a week. If you're used to working a 50-hour week, it could be 55. It just was self-identifying what you think is overtime, which essentially means half of us realize we are working more than we should be. If we lower this, though, to 6 hours of overtime or more, that number jumps to 69%. Which is kind of crazy. And this was the most telling stat, was they said that 82% of us have considered at one point leaving tech due to the stress involved in our jobs. And over a third of those people consider switching jobs due to stress on a regular basis. So if the question is this a community problem? If a third, or if 82% of us have thought of quitting the job, and a third of that, so say 25% of us, do that regularly, I think that's a problem. I think we can all agree that that's a community problem. So what are some ways that we can work on this together? What are some ways that we can come together as a community? And the first way that I think we can help solve this is by DevOps, right? I mean, I know we're at a DevOps Days, so the answer for everything should be DevOps. But DevOps really is a fantastic way that we can address some of the toxic environments that people are working in and try to resolve some of those issues. I'm not going to dive too deeply into that because John Willis, who's one of the founders of DevOps Days and the DevOps movement here in the US, gave a fantastic talk about that. That's the URL to the YouTube video for his presentation. I'll also have these links and post these slides afterwards so you can access those. The other fantastic resource that I think is out there and way that we can address things is self-care. So 2 years ago at this very event, DevOpsDays Portland 2016, Ken Mugrage gave a fantastic talk about how we can take care of ourselves, how we can recognize burnout within ourselves, things that we can do to resolve issues in our own lives. One of the things that he talked about was Christina Maslach's 6 areas of mismatch. Christina Maslach is one of the foremost researchers on burnout. She is a professor at UC Berkeley. She's written a number of books. Those mismatches, though, come down to these things. The first is a work overload, and this is what we commonly recognize as burnout, right? We're working too much. We have too much on our plates. Obviously, for Bob, this was really super obvious. He was working huge amounts of overtime, due in part to having no prioritization of the things he was working on or the constant pivots and being given new things. If this is happening within your organization, talk to management about it. If you're seeing people within your organization that are working too much, it's oftentimes you see people getting rewarded for that, right? Like, good job, you're a hard worker. Actually, that's a bad thing. So as a community, we should come together, discourage that. If you see somebody that's being overworked and that's actually relishing in that or trying to be the hero, discourage that. The second mismatch is a lack of control. In Bob's case, he had no control over what he was doing, right? When they pivoted, he had no control to say, that's the wrong thing, I shouldn't be working on that. Similarly, within your organization, a lack of control, we all need to be heard. So if you see coworkers that are doing things that don't have any sort of input into what they're doing, try to speak up for them. The third is insufficient rewards. Money is a weird thing within our culture, right? There was an open space that Aaron proposed where we gathered up salaries anonymously. It's weird. We don't like to talk about that or tie money. I mean, it was obviously anonymous for the open space for good reason because we have these issues. Bob obviously lost money in moving to Silicon Valley. It's crazy, ridiculous, expensive there. But more than just money, rewards can be things like just being recognized. Appreciate your coworkers is a good way that we can deal with this. You may not be the manager. You may not be able to give people raises. And to be honest, most of us make a decent amount of money that a raise may or may not be useful. But getting recognized, getting that verbal affirmation, getting appreciated is a good reward. Thanks. I feel appreciated. The fourth is a breakdown of workplace or project community. And I have project up there because I also been talking to open source communities about this. But whatever community you're in, and whether that's a workplace or another project that you're working on, we all need to feel like we're connected. And Bob obviously wasn't, right? He was forced to move. He lost the people that he played softball with, the guys that he played music with. A good way to combat this is just to go and hang out with your coworkers. A lot of people really fight against this. They have the idea that I quit work, I go home, keep work there, keep home life separate. But actually going out to lunch with your coworkers, going out to happy hours with them occasionally, building up some bonds is crucial to making people feel like they're connected, to maintaining those connections. There's a fantastic thing that we do at Datadog, and I know a bunch of other companies do it. We have, there's a SaaS-based product that integrates with Slack called Donut AI. Donut AI, really, you join a Slack channel, it pairs you up randomly with someone in that Slack channel, and the idea is take some time, go get coffee with them. It helps you meet new people across your organization. I've met a ton of salespeople who I would normally not associate with. You get to connect with people across your organization. Another way that you can actually approach this too is if you're interviewing, if you're looking for new jobs because you've gotten burned out and you're looking for something new, ask how people have fun together within an organization. If it's only work, if the person that's interviewing you has no idea how people connect within a team, that's a red flag. The fifth mismatch is an absence of fairness. We all need to be felt like we're getting treated fairly. Forcing Bob to relocate, but not others, obviously not fair. There's a lot of times that Bob and I, when we were talking, he kept asking me, like, are they singling me out? Like, are they trying to force me to quit? If you see injustice in your organization, if you see people getting singled out, say something. Pretty much applies to all of life. If you see injustice, say something. The sixth value is the values conflict, right? It's pretty obvious, like, if you believe in gun control, don't go work for the NRA. It doesn't have to be that obvious, though, right? Bob improving web performance and being told that that's not what he's actually getting measured on or not the important thing. That's a values conflict. So it's pretty obvious for some of these things, but it can be small things. Within your organization, though, try to start figuring out if your values are aligned. A great thing, actually, I've got a bunch of friends who work at Sensu, and despite being what some would say competitors, within the monitoring space, I feel like all of us companies, we try to associate and be friends. And one of the things that I love that they do at Sensu is they have this notion that there are sort of 3 stages on anything. If a manager asks you to do something, the three options you have are to either commit and agree and say, I'm going to do this, and I agree with what we're doing, and then do it. Or you can commit and disagree. You can say, cool, I don't think this is the right direction, but you're my manager, I'm going to do it because it's part of my job. Or there's the non-commit and disagree, which essentially is I disagree with this direction that we're going in, and I'm not going to do this, right? Verbally saying those when you're in a meeting or when you're discussing something you're going to do gives you a nice point of data to be able to track that. You don't have to set up dashboards and actual monitoring on that, but keep a mental checklist. How many times am I being asked to do things that I'm committing to doing but disagreeing with, or in the worst case, disagreeing to do that? An interesting thing about all of these mismatches is that Google did a study about what makes a successful team. And the hypothesis here was that as people talk about cross-functional teams, that the most successful team really would be a bunch of people that all have disparate skills. You'd have like an ops person and a QA person and a dev, and when you combine all these mini lion robots, they form Voltron, and that's the most successful team. But it turns out that wasn't the case. It's crazy. Like they realized like it had no bearing on the skills that the teams had. What really mattered was that there was, number one, psychological safety, but then there's all these other things like dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, impact. And the interesting thing is that all of these 5 things sort of fall along those same lines as those 6 mismatches, right? If we think of safety and dependability, that really speaks to the amount of community and trust that you have in people on your team. If we're thinking of things like clarity and structure, that means that there's going to be some fairness. You know the parameters you're working in, you know what you're being measured on, and there's a fair system there. So all of these are really interesting because they match up. Anyway, so those are 2 things that we can do to work as a community. We can spread DevOps. We can try to fix the environments that people are in. We can spread knowledge and help ourselves, right? Because we can't help others if we ourselves are burned out. But I think there's a third part that we're missing, and that's the fact that we can't spread DevOps to everybody. There's always going to be laggards in our industry, and we can help ourselves, but we want to help others. So how do we equip ourselves to help others? The first thing that we need to know is that we have to be equipped. Over a third of all Americans will either burn out or know somebody who's burned out or diagnosed with burnout. So it's something that's going to affect all of us. So the first thing we need to do, if we're going to help others, is how do we recognize burnout? I think it's easy for us to recognize burnout within ourselves. It's a little bit harder when it's somebody else. So if you watch Ken's talk, one of the things that he brings up is Christina Maslach's burnout inventory, or it's also abbreviated the MBI. And Maslach notes that there's really 3 points. There's exhaustion that you can notice in people, there's cynicism, and there's a loss of efficacy. Essentially, burnt out people feel like they're not making a difference. Like the things they do, they're not making progress on. I like those, but I feel like they're slightly off. So there's actually a different inventory. It's called the SMBM. And it uses slightly different phrasing, which I prefer because it makes it much easier for us to recognize burnout. And the first point that they note is that there's physical fatigue. You see people and they're physically tired. And I think that's something we can easily recognize when someone is sleepy at work or they just seem tired. The next is emotional exhaustion. And I think this is key because in the Maslach, in the MBI, it says that people will be cynical, but I think not all of us or not everybody in the industry gets cynical. A lot of times people just get apathetic, and that's a sign of emotional exhaustion, when people just don't care. And then the final one is cognitive weariness, because it's hard for you to be able to look at a coworker and to gauge whether they feel effective or not, right? That's their internal feelings. They may not actually express those. But cognitive weariness is something that we can actually note, right? It's pretty obvious when one of our coworkers just mentally isn't there. You ask them questions and they're not really responding, or they're asking you questions and then you give them the answer and then they ask it again because it's just not sinking in. But I think more than these burnout indicators, it really is, I think the best way is to be connected. My friend Frank has a fantastic test for this that he calls 3 a.m. friends. And 3 a.m. friends says that you should be able to list 3 friends that you could call at 3 a.m. to get you out of a jam. And you should be able to list 3 friends who could call you at 3 a.m. to get you out of a jam. And it's not saying that we need pager duty for friendships, that we should be on call, but it's a good indicator. And it's a great indicator because when we're talking about how to recognize burnout, the simple way to answer that is you'll know. People will tell you. If you have connected friendships, if you have 3 a.m. friends, they'll tell you whether they're burnt out. Now, when I say you'll know, you could be wrong, right? None of us, well, most of us in here are not professional mental health experts. We're not trained psychologists. But that's okay, right? It may not be burnout. It could be something like depression. In fact, there was a study that 86% of people who were diagnosed with burnout were given a depression survey, and they took it, and 86% of people with burnout got diagnosed with depression or met the criteria for depression. So you could get these wrong, but the great thing is that the solutions are exactly the same. So when I realized that I was ill-equipped, I realized also, or after digging around, that there's a great thing called mental health first aid. You can actually go and get trained. Here in Portland, unfortunately, they don't really run too many classes for free. So classes here in the Portland area cost anywhere from $60 to $170. The most reliable one that I've seen, because they do it regularly, is PCC. They offer it as a 1-credit course, so it's pretty easy to get on that. But similar to actual first aid, where you're not a doctor, you're just going to be in a situation where somebody has a medical need, your idea is that you're going to step in with your first aid training, help them out while there's a current crisis. And what they teach you in first aid is, first thing is you shout, someone call 911, right? You're there until a true professional can get there. Similarly, mental health first aid is the same thing. You're there, you're somebody's friend, you're their colleague. You can step in until there's time to get a mental health professional to help them. So you can do this over a series of evenings or a weekend. It's really quick. It's very helpful. For those of you who don't do this, though, I'm going to teach you the core basis of mental health first aid, and that's Algae. This is Algae the Koala because the program originated in Australia. Algae is supposed to be a 5-step process, and it's an acronym. Hopefully easy to remember, although it's not self-referential like most good tech acronyms. But the A stands for assess for risk of suicide or harm, right? The first thing that you should have when you're coming into any mental health crisis, whether that's your own Bob in your life who you call up one day and they're freaking out and they're in their car getting high, or whether it's just a colleague who comes to work and you realize something's wrong, the first thing is do a simple assessment. Are they going to hurt themselves right now? Are they going to hurt someone else? Because if they are, then you need to take immediate action. Now, when you're doing this, there is the myth that if you ask them, are you going to commit suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? There's the myth that that that's going to plant it in their head, and that's just a myth. You will never plant that in somebody's head. If they're thinking about suicide, then they're thinking about it. You're not going to give them that idea. So ask. Just straight up ask, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Right? It's better to get that data up front. If they are, there's a lot of help available. Obviously, you can call the National Crisis Line, which is available everywhere. These are also the numbers for the various counties around the area, including Clark County across the river. There's a lot of resources. Generally, it doesn't really matter what county you're in and which county you call. They're all local calls. Just call one of them. They'll route you to the right place. You can also call 911. I'm mixed about suggesting people call 911 because, as we know, police are not always trained for mental health crises. They often react poorly to them, as we've seen numerous times recently in the news. So use that as a last resort if you do have to call 911 because someone is going to harm themselves or someone else. So that's the A in Algae. The L is to listen non-judgmentally. Really, and this is exactly, when someone says they have a problem, just listen, right? Think about what they're saying, have some empathy, try to think about, what you would be feeling in their situation, and just listen to them. The G in Algae is to give reassurance and information. So reassurance, what does that mean? Well, burnout is real. So number one, a lot of people that go through burnout start putting that blame on themselves, thinking that, well, nobody else is having this, I'm dealing with this, it just must be me. And that is totally incorrect, right? Environments cause burnout. Toxic environments cause burnout. There's a lot of factors in that. Humans are complex systems. So give them reassurance that it's not a personal thing, it's not any fault of their own. And then offer them resources. So resources leads to E. The first E is to encourage appropriate professional help. So there's a ton of professional help available across the area, across the country. A few other ways that you can get help. One is to ask them to take some time and go to a doctor, right? It doesn't have to be a mental health professional. It could just be their physical doctor. Doctors are trained to identify mental health issues and can suggest and point them in the right direction. The other thing that you might want to consider is to speak to HR. And this can be really tricky. So it's not a first line of defense, but HR is there to protect the company. If it is a toxic environment that's burning them out, that means that they might potentially sue the company. So it's in HR's best interest to offer some help, right? It's a little tricky that way. But generally, try to talk to some people, point them in the right direction. That said, I did say there are professional help resources. These are some of them available. 211 is available in over 90% of the US. They'll be able to point you to the proper mental health resources for your area. There's also OSMI, the Open Sourcing Mental Illness Project, which is primarily geared towards tech. So there's a lot of great resources for people that are working in tech on that. There's also NAMI here in Oregon. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, so they have a ton of great resources. The last E is to encourage self-help and other support strategies. So help yourself out, right? You'll always have those professional resources. They can't be with you all the time. So self-support, things like taking regular breaks, right? Like I said, I play Pokemon Go. That started because as a remote worker, I realized one week that I hadn't left the house, right? That's not so good. So I started playing, and I was like, cool, and now I have a reason to go walk around the neighborhood. And then I got addicted to it, so I started doing it a lot. But yeah, things like getting exercise, drawing better boundaries, investing more in a hobby, things that can actually take you away from work, things that can renew your passions, get you connected to people. One thing to note here, though, is encouraging people to take vacation is not a good and not a sustainable practice for help. It can be nice to take a break, clear your head, think about your situation, maybe think about if you want a different job. But telling people to take vacation could make their burnout worse because it's telling them that, hey, we can actually do this work without you. You don't matter. So think about how you do this. If you want to suggest that people take a break, but try to reinforce that they do matter, that they do have some control. A few other self-help resources, burnout.io, again, another sort of tech-oriented resource that you have. Mood Gym is a really interesting one. Mood Gym uses mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So it's a thing that people can actually use on their own. It's a website they can go and do a bunch of exercises on. Scientifically proven, so fantastic resource there. So just to recap Algae. The A is to assess for risk of suicide or harm, listen non-judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage professional help, and then encourage that self-help. So back to that call. Surprisingly, I didn't put him on call. I didn't call the cops. I managed to do most of Algae without even knowing it, right? I asked what drug he'd been taking. I frantically Googled that drug while I was on the phone. It's not the best, but it's relatively safe, right? He wasn't going to OD on it. As long as he wasn't driving around, it was going to be okay. So I kept him on the phone, just listened to him. We talked until he got pretty tired. He seemed like he was mostly in a rightful state of mind, and so we kind of ended there. I managed to fly down and see Bob afterward. So a few weeks later, he was obviously still burnt out. Burnout doesn't go away overnight. But he was doing a little bit better. Shortly afterward, though, the company laid him off, which is probably the best thing to ever happen to him. But he became one of that 82% that considered leaving tech. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. In fact, it took him a little over a year to get a job again. He spent a lot of time just reflecting on what did he want to do. I'm happy to say that he has a job now. He ended up getting a contract position at Google. He's super excited about the work he's doing, and I'm super excited for him. So good ending to the story, which I wasn't sure about when I first wrote this talk. Anyway, just to recap, community solutions for burnout. Number one, take what you learn here and spread DevOps. Start to implement the things that will change environments within organizations. Number two, take care of yourselves. Learn about how to assess yourselves. Start practicing self-care because you can't help anybody if you yourself are burnt out. And then finally, take some training. If price is an issue, man, talk to me. I'm happy to pay the tuition fees for anybody to take mental health first aid. It's fantastic. It'll help you. It'll help this entire community that we're a part of. So I think I'm mostly out of time. Yep. Joe was involved and didn't even wave the 0 at me. Thanks, Joe. Glad you gave me the extra time. In case anyone does have questions, since we don't have time for it though, if you do have questions, I'm around for this entire event, so feel free to talk to me. As noted, I'm not a mental health professional, so I can only give you the advice that I have. It may not be right, so together we can find the answers. If you do want to email me, that's my email address, or hit me up on Twitter. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason. Can I get another round of applause for him and the rest of our speakers? Woo! What a fantastic first day we have had, and it's not even over yet. Some of you stocked your inventories with so much fun that you dropped some items. We have a blue water bottle hanging out in the speaker's lounge, ready for you to pick back up. It's got stickers on it. So if you dropped a blue water bottle while picking up something shinier, we have it. We also have this rad New Relic hoodie with this APM design on the back. So if this belongs to you, if you want to pretend it belongs to you, we will also put this in the speaker's lounge for your retrieval. Now, on to tonight. You may notice that on your badge and on the website, it says after party, 7 p.m. That is wrong. It was 7 p.m. last year, and we realized that was just too much time between the event and 7 p.m. So we worked with the party location to bump it up. It's actually 6 p.m., so it starts in an hour, yes. The party is at OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, and if you haven't been there before, it is super rad, and we are once again renting out the Turbine Hall. And we will have both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages with drink tickets, and we will have heavy, nay, monolithic apps. Hot apps, yes, with vegan and vegetarian options plus dessert. But the best part of Turbine Hall is that it's the hall that is usually used for teaching kids science. So just picture like 300 adult engineers without children around playing with like physics games. We had such a blast last year, and we're doing it again this year. There'll be music. It's sponsored by Workday, and it is about a 15-minute streetcar ride or a 30-minute walk if you want to walk there down to OMSI. And it starts at 6. Doors open at 6. I will see you all there. The code of conduct still applies, so please be safe and treat other people with respect. Organizers will also be there if you see any code of conduct violations. And tomorrow, I will see you bright and early for Blue Star Donuts and more amazing talks. Thank you so much for an amazing first day of DevOps Days Portland 2018. I'll see you at the party.